What up, people? Welcome to another edition of the Guy Talk Pod, where we are honest, open, and transparent. We have another awesome guest with us today. We are going to be diving into some pretty great questions and carving into some perceptions around a local organization, local medical facility here in Baton Rouge specifically, and really talk through some of the great things they are doing within their organization, but also within the community. And today we have, as part of that, Dr. Robert Newton. How you doing today, Dr. Newton?
Doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
Good.
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I am so excited about this conversation. I was preparing for it earlier in the week and really wanted to have some very kind of intentional dialogue to your organization and what you guys do. But before we dive in, why don't you tell the people the organization which we're referencing? I know I'm kind of saying that in a secretive way, but that's, saving the best thing for last. The name of your facility, what you do there, and how long you guys have been within Baton Rouge.
So I am a professor at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center. Pennington has been around since, I think they opened their doors about 1989. So 30 plus years of serving the Baton Rouge community. What we do at Pennington really is we do research, and research that's really centered on trying to solve chronic disease, trying to figure out the triggers of chronic disease and develop interventions that will help people to overcome chronic disease if they have them, prevent chronic disease. So we're in the prevention space. We're also in the treatment space there at Pennington. And we have researchers who are basic scientists, so they deal with, molecular basis of disease, and they're, doing experiments, with rats and cells and things of that nature. And then we have clinical scientists who are there as well. And the clinical scientists really do work where it looks at your physiology. So we have very sophisticated devices at Pennington to measure different components of body composition, like DEXA scan. So when women go to the doctor, when men go and they get bone analysis, that scanner is a DEXA scan, and we have one of those at Pennington. If you go and, we have MRI machines, so we can put people through an MRI and see what's going on inside the body with those machines. We have metabolic chambers, and metabolic chambers allow for us to see how much energy you're burning in a day. So people will stay in the metabolic chambers for 24 hours, and we can get a real accurate measure of actually how much energy are you burning and expending in a day. And so that's a lot what the clinical scientists do. And then we have population scientists. And the population scientists, they go out to the community and deal with science on a larger scale, trying to get large numbers of people involved in interventions, doing interventions in the community, not just in Baton Rouge, but extending out, so in different parishes around Louisiana. So really, it's all research, and a lot of the research centers on obesity, nutrition, diabetes. We have cancer researchers there, sleep researchers. So many chronic diseases is really what Pennington centers on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the things, and thank you for that background. I know you guys are doing some awesome things within the community and really trying to navigate perceptions. And as we do on each episode, we lay the foundation with a biblical scripture and how that parallels into the topic. And what I was led to for today was 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. And I found that interesting in the sense of many of us sometimes do not take the best care of our bodies, thus leading to those chronic illnesses, thus leading to obesity, diabetes, etc. Talk to us about kind of what Pennington is doing around those areas, but particularly around those health disparities between those maybe younger adults, African Americans, the children, families, etc.
So I will tell you that over a long period of time, Pennington has been dealing with obesity and trying to help the Baton Rouge community and beyond to lower weight, to reduce risk factors for developing obesity, and to treat obesity. So many of the major drugs that have been on the market to treat obesity, most of them were tested at Pennington.
Wow.
In addition to other places, but Pennington was part of those. We've had really large-scale, nationwide studies that have looked at trying to prevent diabetes. So 2 of those studies, one was called the Diabetes Prevention Program, and another one was called Look Ahead. And both of those studies, thousands of people in those studies. Those studies were also done at Pennington historically. So those were in the 90s and early 2000s. So, Pennington has been in this game for a very long time trying to address obesity and diabetes. And we're continuing to do studies now looking at ways that people can reduce their risk for developing diabetes and how we can extend some of those programs into the community. So you do a diabetes prevention program, for example, and it's a real controlled study where people are coming into academic centers. They're learning from trained coaches how to alter their physical activity, alter their dietary intake, manage their eating and physical activity. And you do this over the course of a year. Okay, great. Well, how do you translate that to the community? Because most people aren't going to come to the academic center for any extended period of time.
Right.
And many people aren't going to come to the academic center, period, to be involved in a study. So we try to take that information and translate it out into the community. So how can we deliver the diabetes prevention program in the community, say through churches? Okay. So we try to take the information that we learn and then translate it out into the community. In terms of health disparities, Pennington has been doing work for a while in health disparities, trying to address them. And so what I mean by a health disparity is that one group of individuals within a certain segment of the population has a higher rate of a condition compared to other people in that sort of same category. So if we let's just take racial group, and I will say this by saying, start this off by saying that race is not genetic. We're talking about social categories of people, okay?
Are you saying this for us, the pool of those in which you select for the studies?
So if I say African American, or if I say white, or if I say Hispanic, if I say Asian, what I mean is that people are checking a box. But I don't mean that somebody's gone and done a genetic analysis of you to determine where your nationality is from. Okay?
Yeah.
So these are categories that people, the government, other people have made these categories, and so we're fitting people into these categories. So I just wanted to say that as a sort of a preface so that people understood what I was talking about. But so African American women have higher rates of obesity compared to non-Hispanic white women, Hispanic women, Asian women, Native American, Pacific Islander. So that's a health disparity. And that, because they have obesity at a higher rate, they're also at risk for other chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, kidney disease. The list kind of goes on. And so Pennington has been involved in studies designed to specifically addressing obesity in African American women and their daughters. We did a study in the 1990s looking at the dyad between the mother and the daughter, and seeing, or the parent and the child, most of them were mothers and daughters, and seeing how this intervention would affect weight. Okay, and so we showed that was it resulted in weight loss. Okay, I did a study looking at reducing risk for diabetes for African American men. So getting men to get to the physical activity recommendations, how much physical activity we're supposed to do, getting them to that level, and seeing how getting to that level prevents or decreases your risk for developing diabetes. Okay, so we reduced some risk factors in that study. So there's been a number of studies over the years that Pennington has specifically addressed health disparities, and there's studies that are going on right now looking at different health disparities within African Americans. Children is another area where we're pretty we're heavily involved in child obesity. So trying to address child obesity, but not necessarily currently. There's a study that's going on in clinics. So how can we work with doctors and doctors' offices to reduce the risk of obesity in children? How do we reduce children's weight through basically a intervention that's done in physicians' offices?
So sticking with that, a lot of questions come to mind. So with obesity, right? There is a lot of conversation and usage of the GLPs right now. Specifically, Mounjaro's a big one, Wegovy, what's the other? Ozempic, huge with that. Where does Pennington fall in that spectrum of trying to be kind of proactive in it versus trying to help any individual, regardless of ethnicity, curve diabetes? So are you guys kind of in that realm as well in terms of experiments or studies, should I say, not necessarily experiments, studies. I'll correct myself on that.
So I don't think that we're doing any studies currently with Wegovy. Now that doesn't mean, or Ozempic. So I don't think that we're involved in studies right now, but that doesn't mean that we weren't involved in, getting Ozempic and, some of the trials that showed that Ozempic was good for reducing blood glucose, because that's really what it was designed for, was as a diabetes drug.
Yeah.
So what institutions will do, including Pennington, with things of this nature, is they will do studies to look at the effect of, well, if you take the medication and then you make behavior changes, what happens? How does that affect things? What happens when you stop using the medication?
Right.
Do you compare outcomes for just using the medication versus medication plus behavior change, or just behavior change alone? So those are the kinds of studies that are typically done. As far as I know, there's not studies that are going on right now at Pennington looking at GLPs, but there are so many different studies going on at Pennington, I couldn't tell you all of the studies that are going on.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I know there's a lot of great things I want to talk about, but one last thing to that, just going back to perception, right? Pennington, at least when I was growing, I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. Have known about Pennington since as long as I can remember.
Right.
But as many, I think people's perception is that Pennington is in the experimenting line of biomedical research versus studies. Can you kind of tell the audience the difference, so that perception can kind of be eliminated, so people can know Pennington is not out here just really having lab rats that they're doing every day, or human lab rats, and what they're really doing to really make an impact on health.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when people think of biomedical research, especially if you have some fears of biomedical research, and you understand the atrocities that happened, not just with Tuskegee, but the other atrocities that have happened to African Americans across time, and with medical experiments, you're thinking that somebody is doing something to somebody else. A researcher is experimenting on a person, and that person doesn't have the ability to say no.
Right.
And that person has no control over what's happening. Okay, or something is being hidden from them, and so they could be taken advantage of, because if you don't know, you don't know. Correct. Right. Okay. So those kinds of experiments don't happen anymore. The reason why they don't happen anymore is because we have what we call institutional review boards. And so your institutional review board reviews all of the studies that happen at an institution. We can't do a study without it going through our institutional review board. That review board, the primary focus of the review board is safety, participant safety. Okay, it's not the science that we're trying to do, it is participant safety. So if we're doing a study that risks the safety of the participants, the IRB won't approve it. Okay, so that control is over every study that happens, even the studies that are done in animals. There's the equivalent, it's called the IACUC, but it's the equivalent of the IRB, okay, protects the animals.
Right.
So studies that happened, experiments that happened where people were taken advantage of, cruelty, those kinds of things don't happen anymore because we have these controls. And it's not just because of the controls, but because researchers generally don't have desires to do those harmful experiments anymore, okay? So whenever anybody comes to Pennington to do a study, we sit down with people and we tell them exactly what's going to happen in the study. We do it different ways, but oftentimes it's done with a PowerPoint presentation. And you can ask all the questions that you want. And then we have an informed consent that people read, and we go over with you, and it details everything that's going to happen in the study. And we sign every page. And you sign it, the participant signs it, we sign it, and then they keep a copy so they know what's going on. So if they had any suspicion that something wasn't right, they could always go back to that informed consent. It also gives them the number to call if they want to contact Pennington directly, like outside of the investigator, okay? So we have controls. So there's no studies that go on at Pennington where there's some deception, where there's some taking advantage of people. That doesn't happen anymore. And so, yeah, we're focused on protecting our participants.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear, and I think that'll clear the picture for a lot of folks in terms of experimental
Yes.
versus research for the greater good.
Yeah.
Of all.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand there are particular studies relevant to different cultures based upon their disposition as it relates to diabetes or what they're prone to, whether it's family history or whether it's, things of that nature. And I think that's a great segue into.
Well, let me just say this too. That,
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Oftentimes, people hear about a study being done in a particular population, whatever it is. It may be lower SES, lower socioeconomic status.
Right.
It could be in a particular ethnic racial group. It may be a study that's being done in women and not in men, or vice versa, a study done in men and not being done in women. And sometimes people will have. They don't understand, like, why are you doing that study in that particular population? And the reason why we do studies in particular populations is because those populations we don't have as much research on, so we don't know the effect of an intervention on that population. Or there's something about that population where we may need to tweak our standard intervention to make it more effective for that population, okay? So, or take geographic differences as well. So if you want to do something rural, urban. So maybe we do a study here in an urban environment and let's just say it's totally remote. You go out to a rural population, what if they don't have good Wi-Fi? So that the study that you did in the urban population doesn't necessarily apply to the rural population. That's why we're doing it in the rural population. We're trying to figure out how to do it effectively in that population.
Gotcha.
So I think that's important for people to know because they don't always understand the reasons why we do interventions in very specific populations. Could be pregnant women. Like, why are you doing a study in pregnant women? Like, weight loss should be the same for if you're pregnant or if you're not pregnant. Well, there's certain things that pregnant women are dealing with that you or I trying to lose weight, we're not dealing with those same issues, right? So
you mean data when you say that, in terms of data not being enough data out there for a particular population versus another to have that informed studies to show kind of effects of this XYZ? Is that what you mean?
So what I mean is, partly that we don't have the data to say that our intervention that we design for one population works as well in the other population.
Okay.
So sometimes there's just globally there just haven't been enough studies done to say that this intervention will just automatically transfer to another population.
Gotcha.
But then there's also things that individual groups may be dealing with that other groups are not dealing with, that if they're not part of your intervention is not going to be as effective. Okay, so take the urban rural. Okay, so if I ask you, we're involved in a physical activity program, and I ask you to go walk, well, you may be able to just kind of walk in your environment. Okay, you may be able to walk around your block. You may be able to safely without any issues. Okay, you may have sidewalks. Okay, so you doing a walking program is real easy, but somebody who's in a lower SES environment or somebody who's in a rural environment, maybe they can't just get outside their house and walk safely.
Yeah.
Okay, not necessarily safely because of crime, but if you're out in a rural environment, maybe where you would walk would be on streets. The streets may not have enough space. They may have enough walking lanes. So you may be at risk for getting hit by a car.
Yeah.
Okay. So our interventions have to be tailored to the environment that we're working with. That's the other component of it.
Gotcha. No, that's good. That's good. I think that's helpful for a lot of folks. And I think it's also a great segue into the initiatives that we've been kind of talking about off camera and a couple of different events that we've attended. And again, if you're just joining us, this is the Guy Talk Pod. We have Dr. Robert Newton, who is a professor at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center here in the capital city of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we are dialoguing around a few things in terms of perceptions to Pennington, where they're really truly impacting the community in a positive way in terms of their studies, but also what those initiatives look like as it relates to all various cultures within the Louisiana area. And Dr. Newton, you and I talked at an event some months back in regards to a physical activity initiative, I think, that you guys at Pennington are currently, or you're spearheading, is my understanding. And that's relative to fathers and children, if I understood you correctly. And of course, we have a huge male audience, those being fathers, uncles, grandfathers, father figures, etc. Let's talk about that a little bit in terms of what that initiative is and what is it positively impacting, and the why, I guess. The why is this initiative important, but also what kind of led you to do this initiative?
So let me tell you a little bit about the initiative, or for the audience. What we're doing is we have a study in which we're recruiting African American fathers and father figures to engage in more physical activity with their children. And the reasons why we're trying to do this. First of all, children between the ages of 6 and 10, their physical activity starts to decline. And when your physical activity declines as a kid, that tends to track into adulthood, and you put yourself essentially in short, people become at risk for various chronic diseases: hypertension, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, dementia. And so we wanted to test the involvement of fathers to get their kids to be more physically active. So both parents are very important in getting their kids to be physically active. We know a lot about moms and getting moms to help to get their children physically active. What we don't know is about dads, okay? But we do know that fathers play very particular roles in their children's physical activity in terms of high intensity, in terms of emotional management, so and just in terms of tracking the number of steps that kids take. So fathers are important to their children's physical activity. And we don't know, there's been very few studies where fathers, regardless of ethnicity, have been involved in studies designed to help change their children's physical activity or change their children's behavior. And so really the impetus for this project really came because I'm a father and I have kids, and I remember that I, was very active in them being physically active when they were growing up.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see a lot of studies where people were looking at this. And so, long story short, we tried to write this grant over a period of like 5 years before it actually got funded. But we finally got it funded. And it's really in a couple of stages. So the first stage is really, we want to have fathers and father figures engage in discussions about the importance, what they see their role is in terms of their children's physical activity. So really just discussions amongst fathers to hear what their ideas are. And we call those focus groups, okay? And then the second phase is us to really develop the program based on the discussions that the fathers have. And then the third phase is to actually implement the program. To implement the program. So those are the three phases. We're in phase one right now. We're trying to do the discussions so we can gather the data to modify the program to then put the intervention on. So that's really the impetus for the study and what it's about.
No, that's good. That's good. You brought back some memories with me in terms of my kids. And is it sometimes, and you guys may have already come across this or noticed this in your research, but while you was discussing it, I, when my kids were younger, I saw that their physical activity sometimes depended on my physical activity, if they were not already at an age where they were participating in sports through school or something.
Yeah.
So my youngest daughter, who is well, she'll be 3 in next week now, but I noticed that with her, she hadn't started daycare yet. She began to gain weight. She began to get the puffy cheeks and all that good stuff. Well, not good stuff, but those body changes. So we began to walk a little bit in the late afternoon. She began daycare, and she began to really that weight began to kind of melt off, so to speak.
Yeah.
How are you guys looking at it from a perspective of those fathers that may not have the time to exercise with their children, or they're not really into exercise or fitness or walking, whether at the lowest level of walking around their neighborhood to whether at the highest level of going to the gym or through a trainer, may not be there yet. How does this study kind of include this nuance, if you will?
So when we're doing our group discussions, we're not selecting men. We're getting men from all walks of life. So some men are active, some men are not. And so that's the way that we're incorporating it. We're getting views from men, some who are active, some who aren't, some who, live in, who are financially stable, some who are not, some who are in the home, some who are not in the home. There's a bunch of different factors that go into this. And so we're trying to get all men because we want everybody's opinion so that we can develop the most effective intervention for men in all different situations. So it's really the group discussions, that very first phase where we're taking all this into consideration.
Gotcha.
And I should say this too, that, we realize that behavior change is not just up to an individual. It's not a matter of simply willpower. Like, I want to do physical activity, therefore I'm going to do it. There's things that are going on in people's environments that affect their ability to do physical activity and to make behavior change. Some of the things we talked about earlier. So, do you have sidewalks? What's the crime like? What's your stress levels? Access to health care.
Yeah.
Your socioeconomic status. Do you have the ability to buy physical activity equipment for you and your child? Do you have the ability to purchase what's necessary for them to join the soccer team? The football team, flag football team, whatever the situation is, basketball. So, and we call those things the social determinants of health. And so we're taking those things into consideration in our program too. So during the discussions, we're asking about those things, and our intervention is also going to take that into consideration.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how can men, fathers figures, be a part of the initial phase, which is the focus group phase, right?
Yes.
How can they, who should they contact or reach out to be a part of that?
They can call our recruiting department at 225-763-3000.
Okay.
And they can ask about the Face It study. It's that simple.
Gotcha.
We're also, in the community talking about the study. We have flyers that are out at churches, at different community organizations. And so, people can find out about it by just going out into the community. But the easiest way is, 763-3000 is the easiest way. And I will say this too, that we're not just doing this from a Pennington perspective. We're also working with FOAM, which is Fathers on a Mission, to help put on this program.
Great friends of ours, great group of guys.
Yes,
great organization.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is what we call like a community-based program, where it's the researchers collaborating with a community entity to put on the program. It's not just my idea. It's a combination of me and LeVar, FOAM, to really put this on.
Awesome. And we're going to definitely, as part of the credits and on our website, if you don't mind, inform our viewers where they can reach out to be a part of the focus group.
Yep.
As well as, of course, you guys will be able to see this great episode. Dr. Newt, I definitely want to bring you back.
Would love
whether
to come
it's
back.
here or it's at the Pennington location.
Yeah.
I think this is a very important topic for several reasons, right? Perception. Secondly, in terms of what you guys are doing as part of the studies to really be a huge impact in terms of all cultures and their health and those health disparities,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
As it relates to diabetes. I'm sure you guys are doing stuff around high blood pressure, cholesterol, obesity, obviously, and we can talk through those things. But thank you for coming.
You're very
I
welcome.
can't wait to share this with the audience. This is going to be very educational, I think, for so many, outside of just our men audience, but just men and families
Yep.
as well. So thank you again.
My pleasure. I look forward to coming back.
Are you on social media where any folks can find you or kind of?
I don't really have.
You don't have? Okay,
social
that's
media,
fine.
no.
Yeah.
Well, people can go to the lab page. They can
Right.
find out the kinds of things that we're doing.
Okay.
The easiest thing to do is just type in Robert Newton Pennington, and
Yep.
my lab page will pop up.
Okay.
People will see the interventions that we're doing. We have a physical activity intervention for older African American adults. We have the Face It program, which is for African American fathers and father figures. We also have a study that's going to be starting, which is a mobile phone intervention to get African American men to be more physically active.
Awesome.
So that project is called Fit Brothers.
Okay.
So we have that study as well going on. So we got a number of different studies that are out of my lab. People can go to the lab page, look it up. They can email me if they have questions. Yeah,
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
So there you have it, guys. Thank you for joining another episode of the Guy Talk Pod, where we are honest, open, and transparent. Till next time, have a blessed night.